What's up, awesome nerds? It's Mrs. Wynn here. We're going to be talking about CER paragraphs and TLQC, transition, lead, and quote citation. What to do when you want to bring a quote into your paragraphs. A lot of students get overwhelmed when they see prompts for 4-page papers, 10-page papers, 15-page papers when you get into college or in high school, actually. However, these papers are a lot less daunting because if you can do one thing and one thing really well, a paper is just a repetition of that one thing, and that's write a good paragraph. And so that's what we're going to be focusing on during this time, is how to write a good, solid paragraph. What makes it well written? What makes it clear? What makes it concise? So we're going to do kind of just the basics here, and hopefully you can come back to this to, help refresh on how to make something clear. We're going to be focusing on analytical paragraphs. So this may not necessarily apply if you're trying to do a creative writing piece, or say you're writing a reflection or something like that, but the concepts will still be applicable to any style of writing. So let's get into it. So go get your notes and let's get started. And just because this is old school, this is my old name because it's just a tried and true way to go about it. So I don't know who this Miss Robinson is, but she's probably pretty cool. So CER stands for claim, evidence, reasoning. And this is going to be the basic format of any academic writing that you are going to do. So there's academic and then there's creative, and we're going to be focusing on academic today. So a claim, state your opinion as a fact. This should support and connect directly to your thesis. So remember, when I talk about thesis writing, your thesis is the end result, the goal, the journey, like everything points to the thesis. Everything should always be pointing to the thesis. Oh, we called that, I forget now, remember, we call the thesis the queen of the essay. Every other sentence is working towards supporting their queen, your thesis. So the thesis is the queen of the essay. Everything points to her. And then your claims, your minor claims, imagine those are like knights, essentially they're supporting the queen, they're defending the queen, and everything should be able to be connected through logic and reasoning. So you state your fact, your opinion as a fact, you make your claim. Evidence, use credible outside sources to support your opinion. As wildly intelligent as many of you are, one of the ways that we show that we are correct is we show who agrees with us. And that helps. It brings in other voices, maybe other more experienced voices, or you use the actual voice of the text you are analyzing, depending on whether or not you're doing a research paper or a textual analysis. And so that evidence, it's best to bring in evidence in what we call the TLQC format, which I've borrowed from Springboard, which is another curriculum I used to teach. And I'll show you how to introduce those a little bit more smoothly, because at this point in your writing, you probably shouldn't be having one of your sentences just be a quote. You kind of need to cushion it a little bit. And then finally, your reasoning. So your reasoning is two or more sentences that explain in detail how the evidence supports your claim. So you're kind of stitching everything together. Your paper is a lot like a quilt. So when you're writing a paragraph for an analytical purpose, start with your claim, provide your evidence, and your reasoning. Now, you might have other sentences in there as well, like maybe you have your claim and then maybe you need some background information, or maybe you have more than one piece of evidence for this particular topic. That's fine. You can mess with this, but only after you've mastered the basic format, okay? We're starting at level 1. You can level up as you feel more comfortable and as you feel like you can expertly craft paragraphs. But one of the biggest problems that a lot of you run into, and I used to do the exact same thing, is, often, especially if you leave a paper to the last minute, you just start writing and you're like, I don't know. I'm just going to put all these thoughts on here. And while there are some really good ideas often stuck in there, it's kind of like just word vomit, and you have to pick out the good chunks. All right. So it's better if you do that yourself. Don't make your teacher do it. Please don't make me look through your word vomit. Love you though. Okay. So get your notes out. If you are doing this in class with me as an assignment, you most likely have a closed notes kind of thing. So you have fill in the blanks. If you're not a fill in the blank kind of person and you want the whole thing and you're handwriting this, remember, handwriting gets it from short-term to long-term better. And then you can use either, whichever one works best for you. If you are handwriting your notes, remember, you can probably upload these to Google Classroom for credit. Yay, credit. So a direct quotation should not contain a simple idea that a writer could easily paraphrase. So remember, paraphrasing, you do still have to put in citations where you got that idea, but if it's a simple idea that you could use for your own words, it's kind of a waste of space. And this is one of the problems that a lot of students, when they get into those higher levels of writing, run into. They know they need a quote, but rather than find a really good quote, something that's interesting and specific to the topic, they just kind of find any quote. And this is where that simple idea probably gets thrown in, to where it's like, well, technically it's a quote. Yes, but could you have just paraphrased it in your own words? Probably. You really want the words that you are including from another author to pack a punch. You want that to be a lot of the strength in your essay. Don't repeat an idea that has already been said. I see this a lot where students are like, okay, this is the part I understand. So they just pull quotes directly from that piece. And that means you're having a problem with your annotation and your reading comprehension. So you need to go back and check your reading, ask your teacher, ask me, be like, hey, so I got this part really well, but this was where I got confused. And this is where the pre-writing comes in so handy. You need to write these things ahead of time. Repeat an idea that has already been said, and then see what I did there? A direct quotation should not stand alone. So it shouldn't just be your sentence and then a quote and then another sentence from you. Like, so there needs to be some sort of kind of packaging. You need to tie that up with a bow. And it shouldn't be lengthy. A direct quote should not be, for our intents and purposes in high school, they shouldn't be more than 3 lines, preferably. I legit got in trouble because there was not in trouble, but when I was in college, I was stuck on a paper. I didn't know what to do. So I fell into the trap of just including a lot of really long quotes to hit the page limit. And my professor immediately saw through it. And he said, I know that you didn't have a strong idea or a strong purpose for this paper. And so there's a lot of quotes. And while the quotes are good, there's not really a great point to it because your analysis is relatively weak and or missing. And so I did not do well on that paper because I tried to say, like, look at all this reading I did, but that wasn't the purpose. The purpose of the paper was to have an idea, do the reading, do the research, and then figure out what research would support my idea and analyze it in that way. So quotes won't necessarily save you. So try and make sure you keep your quotes to fewer than 3 lines or 3 lines at most. This applies to your extended essay and any papers you have from my class. If I see quotes that are more than 3 lines, most likely it's a pretty clear indicator that you are trying to fill space. Okay, so be mindful of that. Here's what a direct quotation should do, however. It should contain a complex idea that is thought-provoking. So again, it should be complex, it should be interesting, it should be rich, and it should be very strongly connected to your claim and or thesis. It should add another layer of depth to the writing, so it should give you more to talk about as opposed to less. It should be smoothly embedded into the writing. So begin with a transition and a lead-in, preferably. Now, later on, as you become more of an expert writer, you can play with this. You will see seasoned professional writers mess with this and do something a little different, but that's because they know what they're doing. You can't really break the rules until you know the rules. So learn the rules, and then later you're going to break them on purpose because it fulfills your purpose. It adds strength to what you're trying to do. It's not you just not knowing what you're doing. Okay, so follow the rules at first. If this seems formulaic, it's because it is. But it's so much easier to take something that's formulaically written and finesse it and beautify it than it is to take something that's just chaotic and try and make some sense out of it. So, I had a student write his extended essay. He wrote it in this formula, essentially claim, evidence, reasoning, every single paragraph. And so he would have scored probably like high C, B, maybe probably a B, because he had all the pieces. And then when he did his further editing, he was able to really finesse it, smooth out all the rough edges, make it feel a little less boxy. And it was a fantastic paper by the end, but it started like this. So he had time to go back and kind of fix that. So be mindful of that. It should be smoothly embedded and then no more than 3 lines. Okay, if you're doing more than 3 lines, again, you're probably trying to fill some space. So how do I embed something into my paragraph smoothly? How do I make it look a lot less choppy? And this is something that a lot of you struggle with, and it's okay. So I'm going to teach you this little format. It's this acronym, TLQC. So TLQC stands for transition, So a transition acts as a bridge to link ideas and strengthen that cohesion and fluency. And fluency is just the ability to read something easily and clearly. So for example, according to Miss Robinson's research regarding teenage activities, comma, because of the introductory statement, many students were shocked to find out academic grades were negatively impacted when students neglected to do any of the work. All right, so we're not going to get into the rest of that sentence necessarily just now, but look at the transition according to. So that's my introductory phrase. So notice we've got a transition. You have a list of like 100 of these to choose from based on the context of the quote or the context of the paragraph. But this just transition kind of signals, hey, a quote is coming. And it really helps your reader's eyes not get like punched. So add a transition. It's a bridge to link the ideas. And this links from your ideas to another author's ideas, which is why it's really important. And then you have the lead-in. The lead-in is used to set the context for the information in the quote, the who, the what, the where, the when, the why, or the how. Now, sometimes when you are including this type of information, you might have already gone over this. And so your lead-in might not necessarily need to be about the author or about when it was written or anything like that. It might just be you're going to provide some context for the quote. You might be paraphrasing other aspects of the piece in order for your audience to get a more fuller picture. And I love this graphic of when you don't provide context, you might miss something. So make sure that what you are including gives the full scope of what you're talking about. So using our same sentence, according to Ms. Robinson's research regarding teenage activities, many students were shocked to find out. So this is our lead-in, and we're using two different clauses here. We got an introductory clause and then another dependent clause, because many students were shocked to find out wouldn't be able to stand alone as its own sentence. So it's okay if your lead-in is a dependent clause, but it just sets the context. So figure out which of these is most important to answer. Which one do you think this one answers? Research regarding teenage activities, many students were shocked to find out. Is this a who, a what, a where, when, why, or how? Think about it. I'd say a what. This is probably a what and a why maybe. Okay, moving on. So now you get into the quote. The quote needs to come from a credible source to strengthen your ideas, illustrate a point, and or support your controlling idea. Remember, everything serves the queen thesis. So using our sentence here, according to Ms. Robinson's research regarding teenage activities, many students were shocked to find out, and we're pretending this comes from a paper that I wrote. Academic grades were negatively impacted when students neglected to do any of the work. I swear this happens to me at the end of every semester. Kid doesn't do work all year, and then comes in and it's like, wait, I'm failing, but I was in class every day. And it's like, yeah, that's not how this works out. I appreciate your body being in the room. However, no evidence of learning is just that, no evidence of learning. So every year, how do I fix my grade? Time machine. You have to show me what you learned. So not doing any of the assigned tasks, it shows me that you can't communicate in order to find a way to better support you or others on how to show what you learned. So anyways, that's a completely different topic, but we've got a quote, academic grades were negatively impacted when students neglected to do any of the work. Notice we have a comma at the end of the introductory phrases and clauses. So we've got our transition. So a comma after the lead-in, a space, like a whole one, quotation marks. We started with, because this is probably the beginning of a sentence, it's capitalized. If this was the middle of a sentence, it would have an ellipses. So it's ... It shows that something has been taken out. Academic grades were negatively impacted when students neglected to do any of the work. Now, when I originally wrote this, say the original piece had when they neglected to do any of the work, but for this task, I needed to put in students so that the audience understood something. I would put in brackets and then put students in there. If you were going to alter a quote at all, an ellipsis shows that you're taking something out, and brackets mean that you have switched out words for something. So it could just be you need to switch out a pronoun for a noun so that people know who is talking or who is being talked about. Because sometimes that happens if you're just pulling a piece without the entire without the entire essay. It could get a little confusing. So you might need brackets. So if I said they, and it's like, well, are we talking about teachers? Are we talking about staff? Are we talking about students? Who are we talking about? So if I were writing this and I had not included students in the original piece, I would put in brackets so that the audience that I'm talking to knows that the author was talking about students. So there's just a quick little ellipses, dot, 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 and brackets. And then finally, citation. Cite, 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 and then cite some more. Your citation can be pretty simple. I always recommend going to Purdue OWL and look up MLA in-text citations or APA in-text citations if you, not in-text, but footnote citations, depending on what your discipline is. So if you're writing a history paper, there are rules for that. If you're writing a English paper, there are rules for that. So include the author's last name and page number to give credit to the author and to make your writings credible to the reader. Without a citation, it is nothing. So I'm pulling this, I'm saying this came directly from Robinson, page 24. Now, realistically, you would not need to include the last name because you said it in the transition, in the intro. So normally you would not have to include the last name. Here we did, just to kind of give you a feel for what it would include. Now notice there's no page, there's no paragraph, there's no slide, or there's no like extra flair, or there's no like hashtag, which is not a hashtag, guys. It's pound sign, but like number sign. It's just the number. That's it. Okay. And then again, for something that's a little bit more complex, make sure you're going to Purdue OWL, because this gets citing in a text can get a lot more complicated. And that's it. CER, claim, evidence, reasoning. Claim, evidence, reasoning. The claim supports the queen thesis of the paper. Your evidence has to come from a credible source, and your reasoning has to tie everything together so that everything points to your thesis. And then transition, lead in, quote, citation. Transition, choose from those transition words, make sure it fits the context. Is it time, cause and effect? Are you adding information, things like that. So transition, lead in, give context for the quote, put in your quote in quotation marks, use ellipses if you're going to leave a part out, use brackets if you're going to change any particular aspect of the quote, and then author name, last name, and citation number. Also remember that when you are referring to an author in a text, refer to them by their last name. So unless you can show me that you are on a first name basis with an author, which good for you if you are. I've actually seen a student get on Twitter and say, hey, can I use this as evidence that I have permission to use your first name? And the author, because he's a good sport, said, sure, go for it. Absolutely. Fantastic for that kid. But for the rest of you chuckleheads, use their last name and make sure you get their pronouns right. All right. Because if you're spelling their last name wrong, or you're using their pronouns incorrectly, that is a number one indicator that you're not paying attention. It could be an easy mistake, a simple mistake, but it's one that really signals to the reader that either you don't know what you're talking about or you're not paying enough attention, which hurts your credibility. So make sure that those things are right and make sure names are capitalized. It's simple things like that that really add to your credibility. As soon as I see a student not write out the entire word Y-O-U and they're putting letters, or they're not capitalizing their I's, when you write your memoir and you want to have that stylistic approach, you go, Glenn Coco. But until then, capitalize stuff, be credible, give your audience a sense of confidence that you know what you're talking about. And those little errors are real helpful ways to help support that. So good luck to you. You got this. I love you. And hit me up if you have any questions. Good luck, guys.